All right, we're on the phone right now with Mark Tornillo, who, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, you have been the lead singer of Accept, let's see, you took over for Udo Dirkschneider, I want to say 15 years ago? Is that right?
It's just about, 2009.
Yeah.
We started recording Blood of the Nations, so it's 15 years.
Yeah, that's always a tough thing. I mean, it's happened with other bands with, sometimes it's the death of a band, and sometimes bands do even better. I mean, you have examples like AC/DC and Van Halen, of course.
So sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, man. It's a lot to do with chemistry, and it's also a lot to do with the fans and the quality of music that you make, obviously, too, which is, why AC/DC and Van Halen did so well,
Right, and you guys, you didn't become like a band of covers or just rehashing. I mean, you've released some really great music in the past 15 years, including the latest album, Humanoid, which I want to touch on in a little bit. But your story about, for people, just to give people a little background who don't know, so you were actually in a band who was covering some Accept songs. Now, was that when you were in TT Quick?
Very early on, yes.
Okay, all right.
Once we went totally original, obviously, right. Got signed. Actually, we would sneak Son of a Bitch in once in a while, though, just for fun.
Yeah, that's a good tune. And so it's kind of like you went from covering the songs to all of a sudden you're trying out to be lead singer. It's funny. It's kind of similar to, you're touring. You're going to go on tour with KK's Priest, and Tim the Ripper Owens had that same experience.
Yeah,
you guys share an experience there where you had to step in for some iconic frontmen, and
yes.
I'm sure that was a little traumatic at first.
Oh, it was very traumatic, especially before the record came out. I mean, when it was announced that this is what was going to take place, the internet was not kind.
Right.
It was not kind at all. It was like, no way. I was just getting bombarded. So that's what we sat back and said, well, you know what? We better make one hell of a record here, because that's the only way we're going to shut people up. And that's we took almost the better part of a year to write and record Blood of the Nations. And I think it paid off in the long run.
And the latest album, Humanoid, is great. Accept as a band who hasn't veered hardly or very far from the metal genre. You guys are still guaranteed solid metal band. And that's...
I always say if it ain't broke, don't fix it,
Right.
But, we've always, since I've been back in the band, strived for that classic 80s sound. But you use new technology, obviously, and you try to make things fresh and come up with fresh ideas and fresh riffs, and you don't veer too much to the left or the right.
No.
Yeah.
You do what you know. You do what you love, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And on Humanoid, it seems like I wouldn't call it a concept album, but there is kind of some themes of technology taking over or creeping into our lives, which is so very true today. Is that a correct observation?
Yes, by all means. I mean, that's obviously what the title track was to be about. One thing that I hadn't noticed at the time, which in another interview it came up and asked if we had done this on purpose, and I was like, no, but I wish I had, is the fact that Humanoid is followed up by Frankenstein. And if you think about it, the humanoid robot is the digital monster, and Frankenstein is the analog monster.
Yes.
Right. I'm like, wow, I never really looked at it that way, but yeah, it really works,
How do you feel about that kind of stuff, like AI? I think it's terrifying in the sense where you can't really, or most people can't really tell what's real, especially when it comes to music. Like we have fun with it on our morning show, and we make up funny little songs with it about eating chicken wings and things like that. But funny stuff, little funny things where it's fake, but it's getting to the point now where you can't tell, and that's not just music. It's like films and photographs. I mean, how do you guys feel about that?
Well, I can't speak for everyone, but, my nickname in this band is Analog Man. And so I've never been a big fan of digital technology. However, that being said, I mean, it's not so much in the eye of the beholder, but in the eye of the user. What do you plan to do with it is the thing, you know? I mean, I'm sure it can work for, you know, the good of mankind, and I'm sure lots of, you know, positive things can be done with it. There's also a lot of, you know, thievery and you know, other things that could go wrong with this. So it's all about who's using it and for what.
Right.
You know, any kind of new technology can be frightening, you know, until you get a grip on it and see how it works. But you're right when you say you can't tell the difference anymore. I mean, you could sit down with GPT and literally go, write me a song about this and record it, and it'll do it.
Yeah. To me, it's terrifying, and I hope that people see it, as you say, more of a tool, you know, than something to rely on. And because really, it's you know, a computer or a machine or AI is not going to feed off the energy of a crowd like a human being will.
No, it certainly isn't. An album like that, how do you go out and play it live? Do you hire live musicians to go play it, or do you put robots out there?
Yeah.
You know, for my money, it takes all the romance out of it. You know, I mean, the creative process for me is just as important as going out and playing live. It's half the fun, it's half the battle. So I don't know. It just seems like cheating to me. So
I totally see it as cheating. I mean, you know, it takes a talent maybe to operate that kind of stuff, but I see it as you're not living it to put it down into music. You know, you're not translating an experience, you know, like that broken heart or that time you were the most frightened in your life or the time you felt great. Yeah, you know, you'll never get that. Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. I'd like to touch on something else. I read in another interview, you said America is not metal territory anymore.
During that interview,
I
was actually being interviewed by a couple of guys who I know. And that was just a line in passing. It was like, why don't you guys play here more often? Well, the fact of the matter is that we can't really afford to play here that often because we make way more money in Europe, South America, and the rest of the world than you do in the United States. And if you think about it, you know, most metal bands are playing smaller venues here, unless you team up together and you go out and you play the sheds, or you're Metallica with Pantera and you can sell out arenas.
Right.
But other than that, you know, there's the things that are being pushed is not metal. The music, not so much the radios and stuff, but the record companies in this country do not push metal. They push whatever flavor of the week it is, and you know, aim towards kids. If they aimed metal towards kids, I think it would sell. You know.
Yeah.
So it's hard to say, but I certainly didn't mean it in a derogatory way.
Oh, no.
I just meant that it's very difficult for us to get a good tour together. Now, luckily, we got two good bands together that are going to go out and we're gonna kick some ass.
Yeah, this show is definitely 100% metal.
We are on the same page. Ripper and I are, you know, becoming pretty good friends, and we're looking forward to doing this.
Now, I didn't want to make it sound like you were dissing anybody or anything, but it's kind of always.
No, but Blabbermouth did. Blabbermouth grabbed it and runs with it. You know, that's the headline.
Yeah.
It was just a comment in passing. You know.
Yeah.
But that's how they're bottom feeders. That's what they do.
I always saw it as metal has always been, even if you have bands like Metallica, who you mentioned, playing stadiums, metal has always been an underdog genre, at least here in the United States. You know, in Europe, they're singing along to every tune, and it's a completely different environment. Same thing with South America. They'll have 200,000 people, you know, going to see a metal show. But in the U.S., it's always been a fight. You know, ever since I was a teenager, you know, it's always been a fight for airplay, you know, for concerts and promoting concerts, because it's either, you know, people don't take it seriously, or they're afraid of it, or it's too offensive, or whatever it may be.
Or it's satanic, or oh my God.
Yeah. And I think that's what gives it its power. That's part of what gives metal its power and makes the fans more loyal than any other genre of music.
Well, that's the other thing, still to this day. I mean, I've been listening to metal since the 70s, since before it was classified as heavy metal. I still listen to it. I get in the car, I put on, I don't turn on the radio and listen to hip hop or something. I'm still a metalhead. And that's the thing. If you grow up this way, you don't change. A lot of people that whatever they're listening to now, who knows, Taylor Swift or whatever. You think they're going to be listening to that when they're in their 70s? Probably not.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I had a friend who I went to see the Metallica show here in Foxborough, and my friend was giving me such a hard time about it. He's a guy I went to college with. And he was like, "You went to Metallica? Oh, did you wear your sleeveless shirt and bang your head?" I'm like,
"Oh,
you know
my
what?"
God.
And I was like, "You know what? I most certainly did. I did.
Yes.
I was banging my head. I was having a great time. My entire body hurt the next morning when I got up,
Yep.
and it was worth it because I still love it." And he's like, "You shouldn't be listening to that and playing air guitar and stuff." Well, I'm sorry if it's in my blood. You know, that's
and
just,
it makes me feel good,
Yeah.
and it makes me feel young, and So I always say it's a metal is a community, man.
Yes.
And like that's what I love. We just got done doing the festival run in Europe, and it's funny because you leave the hotel, you're driving in a shuttle, and when you get to be about 3 or 4 miles from the festival, you start seeing the black shirts and the long hair and the battle vests and everything. It's like, there's my people.
Yes.
My people are, and it's exciting.
And those are the people who go to work or go to school or wherever they go to their Thanksgiving dinner, and they're the ones that are kind of the outsiders, the misfits.
And they're not hypocrites either.
Right.
They'll
And
tell you
then,
straight up. That's the way it is.
Yeah. And then when they get together, man, it's a celebration, not just of the band, but just of being together. That's one of the great things about metal that I love.
Indeed. Dude, and there's people, like I said, when we see those people walking down the street, there'll be gray hair warriors, there'll be kids,
Yep.
there'll be entire families.
Yes.
It's insane.
Yeah. So you're with KK's Priest. As I mentioned earlier, you and KK's vocalist, Tim Ripper Owens, who kind of the same situation as you. And let me just, as a side note, I have a thing about Rob Halford and Udo. So Udo Dirkschneider and Rob Halford, and along with Graham Bonnet, I call them the 3 blonde, short-haired weirdos of metal. Because they had, and by weirdo, I mean, like we were just talking about, in the most complimentary way, because nobody else was like them. Like they weren't like the Viking looking guys. I mean, Udo had his style, Halford has his style. And then, Graham Bonnet was dressing like Don Johnson in Miami Vice. He wasn't wearing the leather.
I read an article about Graham Bonnet when Richie Blackmore. He used to sneak out to go get his haircut because Richie didn't want him to get his haircut.
Right. Right. But they loved it. They had these booming voices. So you and Tim, you went through a very similar experience stepping in for 2 of these guys who were foundations of metal. And so you guys must have a lot to do you have like a support group going or anything like that?
Not yet, but I think we'll probably work on this. I mean, we played a few shows together so far, but we're going to be together for month and a half here, so I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to sit down and chew the fat.
And then the show at the Wilbur on September 15th. Is there any kind of collaboration or jamming, jumping on stage with each other or anything like that?
You never know. I said, we're just getting started. We talked about it. Tim came up and sang balls with us at Wacken.
Oh, nice.
So we're talking about doing a little interaction here. We'll see how it plays out. I'm looking forward to it. I mean, because we all get along,
Yeah.
Everybody. KK is a great guy, and the kids in the band are really nice, and our band is all gentlemen. So
right. Well, that's September 15th at the Wilbur Theater, a night of metal with KK's Priest and Accept, featuring Mark Tornillo on the vocals for Accept. Mark, thank you very much for taking the time today. I appreciate it. It was great talking with you, and we'll see you at the Wilbur on the 15th.
It is my pleasure, Mike. Thank you very much for having me.